The glory days of the Ottoman Empire were marred by wanton acts of brutality, torture, and executions, seemingly doled out on a whim by dumpy sultans wearing immaculate silk hats. Executions that were carried out by, of all things, the Sultan's own gardeners, who had to chase the condemned through the gardens they tended before strangling them to death.
Why? Why the gardeners?
Yeah, that's probably the first question that's in a lot of people's minds. It's like, why specifically did the Sultan need his gardeners to carry out executions? Did he not have, say, an executioner for that job? So I should clarify that in the Ottoman Empire, the title of gardener was kind of a catch-all term for just a burly man who did things that needed to be done. And the title of head gardener was held in especially high esteem and basically translated to the Sultan's dog's body, who did whatever needed to be done, including executing the Sultan's many, many enemies. And one thing I should clarify is that head gardener is like a translation of a word that I cannot pronounce. It is in a fact bar below. And these men were some of the most feared men in all of the Ottoman Empire due to the power they wielded and just their general burliness, because only the largest, strongest, burliest and oil-chestiest men were allowed to be gardeners in the Ottoman Empire, and they even wore outfits specifically tailored to show off this fact. And as mentioned, these gardeners were basically all-purpose muscle that did whatever the Sultan wanted, whether it was tending to his palatial estate or beating the shit out of rowdy commoners, presumably using their 8-pound mustaches as some kind of rudimentary battering ram. And there's just something about the image of just a burly man with just the immaculately coiffed mustache. And it conveys power and authority. And that's something that's, I think, there's a psychological reasoning behind that. And over in India, I believe police officers are paid a monthly stipend on top of their wages if they can grow a mustache, because mustache conveys authority.
Oh my god.
And that's why almost every Indian police officer has a mustache. Well, that's what I've heard anyway. And for anyone who's wondering, no, I can't grow a mustache. I shave every day, but that's because I just grow the peach fuzz. People could probably see that I have it looks like I've been stuck in our tailpipe right now. So I've got the beginnings of 5 o'clock shadow around my mouth. That's where I grow facial hair, and only there. But hopefully, via the wonders of Photoshop, we're going to have a picture of me with a mustache behind us before we move on.
Yes.
So have fun with that one. Do you know what? Here's a selection of Karl mustaches.
Yes.
Let us know in the comments which one you think works best, because I'll never be able to grow one.
Alright, so how many gardeners were there that were attending the Sultan's gardens?
Usually about 5,000. And as I said, they weren't just gardeners, that was just the title they held. They were just all-purpose muscle that would do anything the Sultan required. And this 5,000 strong force was basically a small private army that did whatever the Sultan wanted them to. And as mentioned, one of their many, many duties was just disposing of the Sultan's enemies. By executing them, usually with their bare hands and sometimes with a silken cord. And for anyone wondering why did they execute people with a silk cord, it was for the comfort of the executioner, not the person being strangled. And that is fucking terrifying to me. The idea that these men killed so many people that they had to develop something to help their hands. It's like those stories you hear from war of executioners who they have to take a break because they're exhausted because they've been up all day shooting people. It's like, fucking hell.
At that point, you just become numb to it. There's no emotion, you're just doing it.
Yeah.
You don't think too much about it, you just get on with it.
And that's where the term gallows humour comes from, isn't it? Because the executioner, it's their job.
Yeah.
And there's stories throughout history of executioners who are just yeah, it's a living, it's what I do. Usually it was a family job, because the role of executioner was historically one that not many people wanted to do. And sometimes it was doled out to prisoners themselves. And one of the few ways, I think back in the Middle Ages, you could avoid being executed is to volunteer to be an executioner.
Be killed or kill.
Yeah, and in the Ottoman Empire, these gardeners, they took their job very seriously because, the Sultan demanded it, and that's why they got those silken cords. And to bring it back to that for a moment, for anyone curious about why the Ottoman Empire favoured that method of execution above all, as that being, strangling people to death with your bare hands, it's because being killed like that was seen as being a clean death because no blood was spilled.
Okay.
And it's for that reason that when noblemen and people of high esteem were going to be executed, they always requested, "Can I be strangled?" And that's like, that's like a really, I can't even imagine what that's like to be in a situation where you know you're going to die. And you're just saying, you think, well, if I'm going to die, I might as well choose the way that I go out. And there's an inherent nobility to facing down oblivion with just that level of just, I don't give a fuck.
What's this about the gardeners having to chase people through the gardens?
Well, that's something that only applied to high-ranking members of the Sultan's court, and commoners and people the Sultan didn't give a shit about, they would just be executed on the spot usually away from the Sultan's chamber, so he wasn't bothered by it. But if you did have like enough prestige in the Sultan's court, you would be given at the very least a warning, and that warning came in the form of a cup of sherbet. And it was customary to receive a cup of sherbet drink when you were meeting with the Sultan. And it was said that if this sherbet was red, you were going to be executed. And if you were, high enough rank to meet with the Sultan, but not high enough rank where he should give a shit, you'd be strangled right then and there in front of him by one of his gardeners. However, if you were good enough, to have earned the Sultan's respect, not enough of it for him to not want to execute it, but enough ways okay, I'll give you a fighting chance, or a sporting chance, as it were, you would be asked to race your executioner through the palace gardens to the ceremonial execution spot. So essentially, you could save yourself from being executed if you could be your executioner in that race.
Yeah, but the executioners were also the gardeners.
Yes, they were, so they knew all the shortcuts. And,
of course they did.
It might not surprise people to learn that there are very few confirmed cases of anybody ever beating one of these gardeners in a foot race, because they saw it as a matter of pride to always win. Plus, as well, they tendered the gardens that they were racing through, so they knew all the shortcuts. Plus, well, they were big, burly men who had physically demanding jobs. And they were racing generally, grand viziers who just sat on their arse drinking sherbet with the Sultan. So, yeah, there's not many people who ever survive this, but there are a few scant cases from history of people, succeeding in this race, and they were merely banished instead of being executed. But I feel compelled to mention one individual head gardener from Ottoman history.
All right, so who was this mysterious head gardener?
Well, that was the head gardener of Mehmed IV Solfikar, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, who killed an estimated 5,000 people during his 5-year-long career
Jesus.
As the head gardener for Mehmed IV, meaning he strangled, on average, 3 people a day, every day, for 5 years straight, after racing all of them through the very gardens that he tended. And according to historical accounts, Solfikar never once lost a race, ever. Just for a moment now, imagine the paralyzing fear of being execution victim number 4,000 or something like that. When you know that this guy has beaten 3,999 people before you. And two of which he beat that morning before he's set to execute you. And before you have a chance to collect your thoughts, just your cell door swings open and someone yells, "Run." And you leg it as hard as you can and you get there to the ceremonial executioner's spot. And just Solfikar's there with his ceremonial strangling rope staring you down.
Oh my god.
After having just sprinted through the gardens like the fucking T-1000. Oh, you'd think at that point to run the other way. Then again, he'd probably catch you. He's gonna catch you.